I'm finding this to be a difficult question to answer. Would you define 2023 as a successful season for the Miami Hurricanes?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube, and we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to be talking to our recruiting overlord in just a second. That means today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Was this a successful season for the Miami Hurricanes? No is my answer. Doesn't mean I'm pissed about the direction of the program. Doesn't mean I'm not encouraged, right? I would use words like encouraged. I would use words like progress, but I would not define this season as successful. I would define it as acceptable. I go back to my preseason prediction, and football, folks, is a results-oriented business. I told you before the season started, my prediction was 8-4. I could have seen Miami in the 8-4, 9-3 range, but I did tell you if I want to be consistent before the season started, I would consider 7-5 to be acceptable. Anything below that, unacceptable. But to be successful, had to be 8-4 or better. So, no, in a results-oriented business, and where you saw a first-year coach like Jeff Brom get his team to 10 wins in an ACC championship game, and in Mario's second year, Miami's going 7-5. Doesn't mean progress isn't being made. When you think about all the young players that have made contributions this year, it doesn't mean things aren't trending in a positive direction, but successful is not a word that I would use. What say you, Brian Smith, as we are joined here by our recruiting overlord and also my colleague at allhurricanes.com? Because listen, it's a loaded question. If this was a successful season, where do you stand on this?
I would go no, and I would almost just mimic what you stated. When you throw away the Georgia Tech game and you could have won, it's ironic they almost beat Florida State. I mean, yeah. Even when Emory was out. Like Miami didn't have that one game where, okay, they're probably not the favorite here, and it's a quality opponent, similar talent. They didn't get over the top in one of those games. They didn't have that moment, and that kind of bothers me. North Carolina, the third quarter against North Carolina, you could argue is the worst quarter of the season. And they were leading at halftime. If they win that game, what happens? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, they had bizarre moments, just catastrophic. And that's the difference between being good and being, okay, this team is right on the cusp of being a playoff contender. So maybe I'm wrong, but the one shining moment for me, and I just wrote about this on All Hurricanes, is talking about, hey, the freshman class even exceeded my expectations. I mean, they had three guys that started and played significantly, plus Emory, et cetera, like Ruben Bain, Malagoa, Mark Fletcher, all these guys. And then, of course, Ray started getting more reps in the BC game. You can see what's coming, but let's be honest. You're a South Florida guy. How many people where you're from are, in your opinion, patient?
Zero. I know zero patient locals. There are none.
That's what I mean. And that's part of the problem here. How do I rate this? Looking at the fan base compared to like where I'm from, it's different. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
And hey, the coaching staff, several of them have either grown up and or have lived in South Florida before coming to this staff. They know the deal. Next year has to be 8-4 or better, probably 9-3 or better. And that's going to be hard because we got a lot of things to get to on that. But 7-5 is better than 5-7 though. You know, you can't knock that. They're way better than they were last year. It's not even competitive.
Yeah, and also I think the bowl game I think is super important. I know that there's this like weird there's a weird culture when you talk about zero patience down here with the fan base. There's also this feeling that hey, if you're not in a New Year's 6, like who really cares what's going to happen in a bowl game? But Mario
That's right.
Cristobal doesn't feel that way. I was listening to Cristobal this morning on the Joe Rose show. He did his weekly radio appearance on WQAM, and he's not going to be happy if the effort is not 1,000% in the bowl game. And so, because his identity, Brian Cristobal, he's really obviously, I wouldn't say he thinks it's a successful season going 7-5, but I think Cristobal really does hang his hat on the fact that in none of Miami's 5 losses did they give up or get blown out, which was a huge change from last year. Because last year, in most of Miami's 7 losses, it was like the team quit as soon as there was adversity in a lot of those L's, which didn't happen this year. And you see the way that they finished the season really strong at Boston College, who I think is a better team than a lot of people give them credit for. So when you go into this bowl game, we don't know for sure what that's going to be. The latest strong rumor, and I talked about this in our Locked On Canes Insider chat, was the Military Bowl really wants Miami versus SMU. They want that to be their matchup. So, which, the Lashley storyline would write itself in a game like that. But to me, Brian, when I say it's not a successful season, I could trend more in that direction if Miami has a strong showing in a bowl victory. I could get closer to that.
I would agree. Here's the deal. We have, the joke is there's 3 seasons in football. There's recruiting, there's spring ball, and then the season. Well, I think there's a 4th now, and that's the December transfer portal / who plays in the bowl game season. Yeah. I hate all of that. And I know that without knowing the man personally, but studying him every day, that's what Mario Cristobal's talking about with the effort and all that. He knows that it's impossible, but his makeup doesn't fit the transfer portal here. It doesn't. He's very old school. And I'm sure he's angry with it, but he can't fix it. So which kids are on my roster to go to this bowl, practice, prep, go through it, actually apply themselves, not just during the practice, but learning the playbook, what they eat, what they do. Did they meet curfew? Don't get me started on curfew stories on bowl season. That's not a Miami thing. That's a problem.
National thing. Yeah.
Oh, when you play games in places like New Orleans, it's a different deal. But anyway, Miami needs to have a good showing in ways that he's not going to get into. I mean, you and I talk about all the time. He's not very forthcoming with information at press conferences, and we're being kind.
Yeah.
But you can tell what he's talking about here. Are we dialed in? We're not going to get better next spring if they're lucky, they're in a bowl game, you get all these extra practices. That's an advantage. But at the same time, we're going to take advantage of those and then play well in the bowl game. We don't even know if Miami, he's up against it here, though. The quarterback situation, which we'll talk about in a second, we don't even know we have no idea. It's really awkward because if you're transferring, you don't want to play in the bowl game because you're afraid to get hurt. But Miami has to have quarterback, all those things. Who's leaving, who's not? It is a conundrum. This is the 4th season in college football, in my opinion.
I got to tell you, just based on the Canes fans that I interact with on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat, on X, and on all social media platforms, I'm actually surprised at the way some people keep changing their tunes back and forth on Tyler Van Dyke. Because, Brian, after the NC State game, I saw, outside of the Van Dyke family, I don't think I saw any allies for Tyler Van Dyke. Everyone was ready to move on. And then, based on, the way he just played against Boston College, and he also played very well in the loss against Louisville, I'm starting to see a lot of people who I interact with, a lot of Hurricanes fans who are like, you know what? Maybe he should come back next year and get some continuity under not Lashley, wow, Freudian slip, get some continuity under Shannon Dawson.
Sure.
Maybe he was playing through more injuries than we thought middle of the season this year. So Van Dyke has more allies among the Canes fan base than I expected he would at this point. Personally, just my opinion, I expect both parties to kind of turn the page and him move on next year. But that's not, not based on any inside info, just based on me reading the tea leaves. Do you think there's a chance Van Dyke remains in Miami next year?
I'd give it 10%. I don't think it's Tyler and Shannon Dawson not getting along or this and that. He's a Northeast guy. His mom's obviously very active, or at least has been in the past. I don't know how much she has been recently with him. And, parents don't like seeing this stuff. This is common, but it eats families up when their kids getting hammered. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's not Tyler so much. I've spoken to him once, met him, and he's a nice guy.
Very, yeah.
But at the same time, at some point, you're like, to heck with this. And I'm saying that very kindly. I'm ready for something else. Miami's fan base is, if you're not exactly what they want, they're A or B. They're not a very friendly fan base in that regard. He's probably ready for something different. Do you blame him?
No.
I mean, it's not like he's not throwing to a lot of talent. It's not like the offensive line's not good, but they're going to lose some of those guys. This year's offensive line's, in my opinion, probably top 10 in the country. But at the same time, it's just, you know what? Maybe someplace where I'm not going to be screamed at if I make a mistake is better. Yeah. So I think that he'll move on. And that, of course, opens up more questions that I could possibly begin to list or answer. Emory, when's he going to come back? Does Brown want to, that gets into a Miami might have the biggest question mark of any FBS school at Signal Caller, because we have no idea if they're going to have more than one kid on the roster in spring that's really ready to perform next. I mean, and he's hurt right now. So it's really awkward. What Van Dyke does, Miami needs to know, even if it's internally now, which is also awkward. I'm sure Shannon's talked to him about it, but that needs to happen very, very soon, because you can't miss on a transfer portal quarterback. And the best way not to screw that up is to go all in now. It opens on the 4th, which I believe is next Monday or whatever.
Yep.
They got to be able to hit the ground running. There are some guys that have not entered yet that will. I'm sure you've heard tea leaves as well. If Miami misses there, I mean, 7-5 might be the best they do next year. Emory may not be ready. We don't know. There's all kinds of ways to look at this. So I say 10% for Tyler, and hopefully that gets taken care of one way or the other very soon.
Brian Smith and I are going to dive headfirst into recruiting talk when we come back, and we might as well start with the quarterback position, because Miami recently offered Chaminade Madonna quarterback CJ Bailey, which, if they can flip him from NC State, which is obviously not a done deal, that's a question mark, Miami could be bringing in 2 quarterbacks, 2 freshmen in the class of 2024. I also want to talk about Ellis Robinson IV, because there's been a lot of chatter and a lot of buzz about the 5-star cornerback possibly flipping his commitment from Georgia to Miami. You know what this means, folks? This means we are only getting started. You want to keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. Buying last-minute tickets should not be a stressful experience. It used to be for me before I found Game Time. I used to log on wondering, am I getting ripped off? Am I getting a good deal day before, day of an event? You were always getting that at Game Time. In fact, I look forward to waiting until the day before or the day of some of these events to see what kind of a deal I can get. When you log on to the Game Time app, first of all, it's very intuitive, because they fill up your homepage right there with events in your area upcoming. They seem to know exactly where I want to go before I even have a chance to start browsing, which is pretty awesome the way that works. You can get views from your seats right there on the app, exactly what you're going to be looking at, your angle at the stage, the field, the court, whatever, and you get a lowest price guarantee. Guys, the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. You'll find tickets in the same section and row for less. If you find tickets in the same section or in row for less, I should say, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts, and available free on YouTube. So, Miami, for whatever reason, got in a little bit late into the game with CJ Bailey, the quarterback from Chaminade. And, again, my understanding is the offer that Miami recently extended to him is truly based on Miami thinking this is a quarterback we could really use and develop here. It's not just based on, hey, maybe we've got a shot at Jeremiah Smith if we offer his quarterback, that this is legitimate. Miami really likes CJ Bailey. Brian, he's been committed to NC State since last March. Obviously, the pull of staying home or near home could be a powerful one for him. Can Miami make up ground for a potential flip here?
I think that is based on the following question. How much have they been recruiting him throughout? Like, how did that work? And I haven't talked to CJ recently. He's a great kid, by the way. I don't know. He was a guy that got several offers, but I don't think Miami was hot on him early. They just kept tabs.
Yeah.
Does that bother it? Like, he's a pretty chill guy. But some kids that will rub raw, even if it's, and I don't know which school he rooted for growing up. I assume it was Miami or Florida State because that's what most kids do in South Florida. But does that really tick him off or somebody else around him? I don't know. I haven't spoken to anybody, but it is the local school. Zaquan's committed. JoJo's committed. Jeremiah, although I still expect him to end up at Ohio State until otherwise proven, is a guy that would tell him, hey, this is what I think. I think he would get all positive vibes from the kids that are around him that are his buddies and have been forever. So I wouldn't be surprised. And let's be really honest. Who's excited about NC State's offense right now? I mean, I'm not picking on them, but they have a extremely defensive-minded head coach.
Right.
He's really good at it,
Yeah.
but their offense stinks. It stinks.
Well,
and they don't have enough playmakers.
Outside of Casey Concepcion and Brian, I've even heard some rumors, Brian, that some people wonder if he might hit the transfer portal.
I look. Can you imagine what he would command on the market?
Yeah.
$500K would be bottom end.
I would love to get him down here. Let me just put that on the record. If Miami can get into the Casey Concepcion sweepstakes, giddy up.
Look, he's a dude.
Yeah.
But they don't have anybody else that excites you. I'm not saying they don't have other good players. They're Power 5 kids. I watched them 3-4 times. They're not that great offensively. They don't have a great offensive line. They don't have anything besides him that you go, okay, well, so why would CJ want to go there? And the answer to all these things is always the same. And I say it on this show and others, relationships. How good is CJ's relationships at NC State compared to Miami? And what's the home pull? That is a really big conundrum. And only CJ can answer that question. And he's obviously not standing here. So I think they can get him, but there's a lot of things to wade through. That's not easy because recruiting is relationship based from top to bottom. They made him a priority, and congrats to NC State for seeing the long term with him because CJ's improvement from junior to senior year is significant. I mean, it is huge. I think there's no doubt about that. And to be honest with you, CJ's the kind of kid that I think, he's got a pretty high ceiling. He's got a cannon for an arm. He just has to add weight. He's a toothpick. He's $185 at 6'6". He looks like a wing forward. So he's got to add weight. But after a year that he redshirts, he could compete. The arm won't be a problem. And he knows some of the guys on the roster. He grew up playing with a bunch of them. So it would be interesting if he came to Miami.
Anything more you can add to the scouting report? Because you've watched CJ play in person more than most, right? And in terms, if he were to end up at Miami, what could Miami fans expect from a guy like CJ Bailey?
He's the home run hitter, man. Now I know that he's throwing to dudes. When he played with SFE and with Chaminade, it's not fair. But at the same time, I mean, my dead grandmother would have thrown for 50%. But the point is still the same. And I kid CJ about this and stuff like, well, you're throwing to Jeremiah and JoJo. Which one's it going to be today? I give him a hard time or something. But at the same time, he would be decisive.
Yeah. Even
when he made an error, he's decisive. So, and he's gotten better. The knock on him is that he would throw it too hard on the shorter stuff. And that's typical. Again, he has a cannon for an arm. Now he's starting to take something off and lead his receivers with touch. Phil Simms said this a long time ago in the NFL. If you want to rack up yards, the most important play is the check down. Of course, that's the most boring play in football, but 2nd and 6 is better than 2nd and 10 or an interception. Yeah. CJ has learned that. Phil Simms obviously knows a little about football. Those are the kinds of plays where when you start to see them as a high school player, that's a really good sign for us that scout kids. Because most of the guys, I could be standing there with Andrew Ivins, John Garcia, whoever it is, and we're talking about a quarterback. We're like, this kid's forcing it into coverage. He doesn't want to go to his short. It's the conversation we have constantly. CJ has made that progression. Now the question is, how quickly can he pick up the offense wherever he goes, NC State or Miami? I think he'll be okay with that. He's a smart kid, but the arm talent and the ability to adjust, he's shown it. So I think he's a guy that could be a very high ceiling quarterback.
Flipping to the defensive side of the football, but I want to ask you about one of CJ's teammates. 4-star safety Zaquan Patterson is committed to the Miami Hurricanes. Now, I have no doubt Zaquan is a stud. I've watched enough of the crazy high school interceptions that he's made. But my question would be, Do you think he's physically and mentally mature enough to play significantly his first year? Because depending on what Miami does in the transfer portal and depending on who leaves for the NFL, there could be an opportunity for a guy like Zaquan Patterson to play a lot in 2024 at Miami.
This is a really complicated question for me because I'm biased. I know him pretty well. Great kid. And intellectually, he's above the fray by a landslide. But at the same time, he's so versatile. I struggle with the following. Where's he going to play?
Mm-hmm.
Nickel, free safety, strong safety. He can play all of them, but there's the old saying, are you going to be the master of nothing? You know what I mean? Or are you going to be really good? There's going to be this thought, because this is what coaches do. Well, he can play all. Give him one thing, let him learn it. The playbook is the key here. Physically, Zaquan ready. He was ready before the season started. Like, he physically was ready for college before his senior year of high school. He's very developed, and he's a smart kid. But I think, like, as the nickel role, something where he stays in the box more would be good year one, because playing free safety at college football level with these spreads and all the motions they try to do to get you out of place. What did Miami struggle with the most this year? The big passing play. And they had two guys that are going to end up. It is hard. It is hard. There were plays against BC where those two safeties that are going to get drafted were not where they should have been this past weekend. It's hard. So if they can keep him in the box year one, or put him underneath where he's guarding the tight end or running back in the slot, something like that, I think that would be his role. And absolutely he can do it. This is not your normal young man. Very intelligent, and he just loves football. Whenever I talk to him, whether on record, off the record, we talked a little about recruiting, but it was more about the 7-on-7 game or the team they were playing. It was just more fun to talk to him than most kids because he's so intellectually gifted. I think he can pick it up. And long term, he'll be like Cam, that'll play in the back end and kind of direct things. I don't want a true freshman, even as smart as Zaquan is, doing that, though.
Yeah.
And Lance's defense is not very friendly for a freshman. It's not. And I'm being extremely kind. But the best defenses are complicated. And that's the whole point. The other team's got to deal with it too. Long term, you'll see him at free safety, I think. Short term, probably more in the box.
I want to talk about some possible flips, including Ellis Robinson IV when we come back. We're not done yet. You want to keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. And I hope you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. So $150 if your team wins. I won big on the Miami Dolphins a couple of days ago. I had Jalen Hurts scoring a rushing touchdown yesterday and the Eagles covering 2.5 points. So I was a big winner on that as well. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get into the action with conference championship games coming up this week, bowl season, NFL really just heating up at this point. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. For your second listen, guys, I hope you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Network, we have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is there for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It really is awesome. Brian Smith, our recruiting overlord, is with us. Brian, we have a saying when we're talking recruiting, and that's follow the visits. And Ellis Robinson IV out of IMG Academy, 5-star cornerback who's long been committed to Georgia. He's taken a number of visits to Miami. There seems to be some optimism from the Miami side. What's happening there?
Miami just, first off, they don't give up on kids. I'm not sure there's a staff that does a better job of staying on recruits that committed elsewhere than Mario and his staff. First, that's just huge credit, because a lot of guys get discouraged when a kid doesn't pick their school. Coaches are pretty thin-skinned. They've done a great job with it. 2, you said it. He's come down and visited. Now, my question is, signing day is not till the 20th of December, so we got a little time. Does he come down again in any capacity? If he doesn't, I lean Georgia. If he does, I lean Miami. Where do you go? He's not going to like. I can go down to IMG, and talk to him or something. But he's not. It doesn't matter. He doesn't need to be interviewed anymore. He's not going to give anybody any straight answers anyway. Follow the visits. I haven't heard anything specific in the last few days, but I've been reading some of the things you have. Maybe that happens, but in-home visits are coming up, etc. If he takes more than, especially if he, obviously Georgia's going to get an in-home. Does Miami and others, is he openly looking here? He talks good on Twitter about Georgia, but that doesn't mean all the stuff we hear behind the scenes fits that as well. So let's see where he goes.
I wanted to add an interesting nugget. Like I mentioned earlier, I was listening to Mario Cristobal on the Joe Roast show this morning, and Cristobal made a comment. Now, he is so detail-oriented when it comes to recruiting. Some people might hear this as kind of a throwaway comment, but I don't think Cristobal would say this by accident, Brian. When he was talking about finishing up the recruiting class, he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but that we need to get 30 plus guys who are Ruben Bain types and talking about recruiting. Now, when he throws out 30 plus, okay, Miami right now has 26 verbal commits. Obviously, you try not to, but some of those may flip elsewhere before it's said and done. But when I look at the number 26, I see that as really close to being a full class, Brian. And I've talked about maybe you end up with 28 guys, 27, 28 when it's all said and done. When Mario Cristobal is on the radio saying 30 plus, I don't think he throws that number out there by accident. So maybe we're looking at Miami actually trying to close more than 30 guys in the class of 2024, which to me would mean you're probably going to lose some guys in the portal and, maybe you nudge some guys into the portal, but I don't think he throws out 30 plus by accident.
No, this is the new era. Keynote here for anybody that didn't already know, and I know Alex does. 25 used to be the number you could sign.
Yeah.
That has been lifted. There is no quote unquote, and this is, I think, a terrible rule, but there has been no number for a class.
Yeah.
At some point, like the 1976 team that won it for Pittsburgh, that senior class had like 70 some kids. They just decided we're going all in on this class when they're seniors. Yeah, and Tony Dorsett was one of them that kind of helped too. Yeah. But somebody's going to do that. That's a Louisville, that next notch, but that's a story for another day. Miami, Georgia, like a bunch of these teams, even the higher level programs in terms of historical significance, they're taking 25 plus. Georgia's class is massive.
Yeah, it is.
It's not like Georgia is short. They're probably going to win it again. It's not like they're short of talent, but kids are leaving so much. I think it's more than anything else. It's a preemptive strike by the head coach, in this case, Cristobal. We know we're going to lose kids because we're building depth and kids don't want to wait.
Right.
That's not Mario's fault.
Right.
That's the NCAA, again, screwing up with how they did the transfer portal and all that. There has to be more limitations and they have to back it up more than they have. Or kids are just, everybody's trying to get multiple transfers and kids are getting stuck and all that. They need to hardline some kids a little bit more to get this to slow down. But everybody I've talked to thinks it's going to be the worst transfer portal edition yet when it opens up next week. Miami, how many do you think, Alex? How many do you think leave Miami? 15?
Yeah,
18? I mean, it's
about that.
I'm guessing that range.
Yeah.
Would it shock you if it was above 18?
No, it was.
It wouldn't me either. Yeah. So you have to replace that. And he would rather do it through high school kids and JUCOs. Yeah. But at the same time, if it's a kid that can come in and help you, he's not going to shed a tear, and that could cause somebody else to leave. It just is what it is. You're going to, like Miami, it was 40 or 41 players that transferred in and out last year. I don't think that's almost half your roster. That may be the norm for at least a while.
Jeez. So going back to flips, could you see Miami flipping any of the defensive tackles that they missed on for this guy? I'm going to say probably not on LJ McCrae. People ask me about him. He's saying all the right things still about Florida. I don't know if Florida not being bowl eligible changes anybody's opinion, but that's one I'm not expecting. But because defensive tackle is a huge area of need for Miami, Brian.
This is my biggest concern in quote unquote talent acquisition, recruiting, JUCO, transfer portal. I agree on McCrae. Auburn, I heard, was possible, but he's from right down the road from Florida. I mean, Daytona is like an hour, 15, something like that to the Swamp. That's hard. Breland, I mean, he's committed to Oregon. That's a West Coast kid. That's rough. Scott stayed home. Most of these kids have stayed pretty close. I don't know of one. Now, that doesn't mean they won't get somebody else that we're not looking at as we're looking at the 5-star kids.
Yeah.
Does that mean there isn't somebody else? No. Do I think they'll take a JUCO kid, a transfer kid, and maybe another 3-star kid? Possibly. I think they're going to underwhelm what the fans want with what they sign. I'm just going to say it now.
Yeah.
My expectations are not very good for what the fans expect.
Okay.
And it's not due to a lack of effort. Like, if there's one thing I'll bitch about, it might be something on the field coaching, but they zero with recruiting. They have put in the effort. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. So if they lose Leonard Taylor and they don't do well in the portal at D tackle, it's going to be hard next year.
Yeah.
You know, it is what it is. So everybody that I've spoken to, D-line and O-line, really high on the board for the portal this year. Of course, quarterback kind of speaks for itself, but those are the areas Miami needs again. It's going to be very interesting because they can't miss.
So we're already in overtime, but I want to ask you about one more player because I think this is too important on the defensive tackle note. You recently visited with Artavius Jones, who he's committed to Miami. There's been a lot of concern and a lot of smoke about Florida State. He lives right down the road from Florida State. Do you think Artavius Jones is still locked in?
Right now, I would pick Miami, and that's face-to-face conversation. He said Florida State really wants him to visit, and UCF does, and all that. And he's like, that would kind of give them an edge. I've already been to Miami, etc. I don't think he's going to take them. I was kind of surprised. He could, though. Bluntstown, where he's at, is about 45 minutes southwest of Tallahassee. I mean, it's a stone's throw. So it's not real hard for him to get there. He had the Miami gloves on the other night when I went to see him play. He loves the Miami staff. My guess is he's going to stick with Miami, but he admits, hey, school like Colorado's coming after him. All kinds of schools are coming after him. You cannot teach 6'3", 310. And here's how athletic he is. He was running routes with the receivers in pregame, and I'm not exaggerating, and catching the ball naturally.
That's crazy.
It's insane.
Wow.
I've never even heard of that, let alone see it. When in the pregame look, I'm like, wait a minute, what's Artavius? And he's running routes. And I'm like, oh my God. He's the kind of kid that's going to play pretty early. He's playing 1A football. That's my only concern.
Yeah.
He's just mauling kids at the high school level. But at the same time, if he comes to Miami, he can play early. And I'm sure they're pitching that. And that's one of the reasons he's so locked in. Like, look, Taylor's probably going to leave. We need help. We need size. Come on down. I think he's going to stick with the Canes, but he is definitely in communication with other schools too.
Yeah. Well, great stuff as always. You want to make sure you follow Brian on X at FBScout_Florida. Check out his work at allhurricanes.com. I write for that website as well. We put out a ton of stuff, a ton of great content at allhurricanes.com. Brian, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, sir. Have a great one.
Awesome stuff as always. We will talk to everyone next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.